Okay, good. Are we here? Did we get to this? We got laissez-faire economics. That look familiar? Okay, I'm a different spot in every class. We got to get going. And just watching all the leaves spiral. That's really, the wind is really picked up. When I saw the sun out, I thought, oh, it's nice, but not pleasant outside. And what do you call it when a company gets larger, becomes more efficient, has a competitive advantage? What is that called? Well, everybody wants to create a monopoly, but there's a name for it. Yeah, something scale. Economies of scale, the iron rule of economics. You get bigger, you become more efficient, and therefore you can drive your competitors out of business because you can cut your costs. And what does every company want to achieve? To create a what? We kind of already said it. Something that operates like a monopoly, so you don't have the risk. Now, we got this, Jeff. Did we get all this? Did we get all the way to conservative economics? Yeah, so this is conservative economics today. It's a little bit different, but the whole idea is, to help the big. With the idea of being big is more efficient, they would say, but they don't mess with how they compete. And don't forget, we went over Adam Smith and the role of government. That's why we get here, the role of government, therefore the parts that affect our life. So let's get to the next one, maybe. So what do we have? The last factor, big deal. We have a new word. So before 18, families. We're talking about families here. Now, you notice I put an asterisk. I don't mean, so what I'm trying to say is, it wasn't like all of a sudden like 1815, like January 1st, 1815, everything changed. It's going to take a long time for this to happen. So 1815, because that's when the War of 1812 ended. But families were producers. Families were self-sufficient. And manufacturing, production was done within the home. Manufacturing was done, they call it the putting out system. Now, we mentioned cottage industry, but I'm giving you the term they called it then. Think about a merchant. Someone from the merchant class will put orders out to families to do production. Here is a family, and this picture is really showing it to be miserable. It was tough, hard life, but it's kind of exaggerated here. But you notice the entire family is working. You might notice the hollow eyes, so it's a tough, backbreaking job, but still, they are in charge of their own fate. They decide whether or not to take these orders. They decide how hard they'll work. They'll decide if they want to get it all done in 2 days, or they can stretch it out for days. Merchants would complain over and over again about how they didn't have enough control over the people taking their orders. And there's one more thing. Who's the most important person economically? Amount they produce. Who's the most important in that picture? You can't really say, can you? They're all important. Now, we could argue, socially and legally, almost certainly the man, I don't know, him or him, I don't know, but they're the most, legally, but economically, every single person there is important. So the kids are important economically. They're needed for production. Didn't matter about sex, age, they're all needed. So all together, all in this together. And we are independent. Production decided at home and by their hands. And they can decide when they work and when they don't work. And remember, nobody cared about the time. And lastly, pay was based upon skill and how hard and how many orders you would take. And an artisan is a skilled craftsman. And it takes a long time to become an artisan. No, I'm talking about manufacturing, but farming was essentially the same thing. And your home was the area of production. And it was like that for almost everybody in some way. That's the old. So, before, that's what it was. The new world, well, what's coming? After 1815, And once again, asterisk, because it's going to be over the next century. As we mentioned before, they became consumers and dependent upon a wage. You have to have money to buy your product. You can't make it yourself. You're a consumer. You need money. And if money goes to something else, you don't have money for food. Now, production is no longer the putting out of orders. It is a factory system. And who has the capital makes the rules. And even if you're self-employed, still reliant upon those with capital. And not independent. The merchant capitalist is in charge. You're dependent upon a wage. You're dependent upon the job. And you know what? The merchant capitalist isn't hiring. A significant number of people do not have money. They can't afford the goods to survive. They starve. It's a much more interdependent system, capitalism. Hey, if they're not hiring, people starve. They don't have a place to live. They don't have a home. They don't have food. I mean, it was difficult before, of course, but never before have people been more so reliant on somebody else, on another system. Economic depression, no matter how hard of a worker you are, if they're not hiring, so, oops, and it's the wage system. Skill, not as important. That's that skills in demand. Hard work, wages. Be demoralized. Different world, though. Doesn't mean good or bad, but it's complex. And so, though, this is a big deal, the Industrial Revolution. This changes everything. And they're going to get a name for it. Now, this has been relatively recently, but we've got to know the name. More and more, you'll see this time of traumatic change, and it really was, but also incredible innovation, was the market revolution. And it was all those things that came about with the changes of the Industrial Revolution. Capitalism, the transportation revolution, and this financial, I want to say revolution, but it's explosion of finance and banking. Which has never ended. I was just reading this morning in the New York Times about shadow banking and how nobody knows what the heck's going on with shadow banking. Has anyone ever heard of shadow banking? A couple people have. These people outside of the banking system making loans, etc. It's don't know. We're in the middle of a bubble, so we're kind of waiting to see what happens with the bubble. By the way, I mentioned before, what's the bubble in? What industry? Generating AI. It is. And bubbles popping. So we'll see where that ends. Back, let me check. Come on. Let me see the bubble in real time. You're watching me look on my phone for stock prices. %70 of all industrial activity right now is generated via AI. So we'll see where that goes. So that is supposed to, speaking of that, that is a picture of what happens in the market revolution. In the financial, it's called the Panic of 1837. So these are the factors and attention. Everyone, picture of the class before, like that. By the way, you notice how happy everybody is? They see this, you look up. He knows. And what is it? Well, when you write an essay, one of the biggest issues about writing an essay, and I've seen this for years, is that people just forget information. They just, well, heck, think about it. When you get an essay, you have to write a 5-paragraph, 4-paragraph essay, whatever it might be. Once you put pen to paper or start typing it, what is the only thing you're thinking about once you get started? Everybody is like this. Finishing. Aren't you? You want to get done. Especially if it's time to look at the clock. I got 20 minutes. I got to write. Go, 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 go. And that's when you forget stuff. I've done it. I remember doing this. I know all of you have been in that situation where once you start writing, you just forget information. And that says you have to get facts, information. and explain it. And it's so easy to forget once you start writing. So one of the first things I do, you might have had this in some classes, you might not have, depending on this. I'm a firm believer in what's called a brainstorm list to get the context or background. So we're going to talk about that right now. She knew the background information, things that led up to it. Now, if we're going to make a list, I mean literally a list, concise, quick, write down as many things as possible to try to get down information you can use in your essay, or at least to get your mind going. So I demand these when you write an essay. You have to turn this in. You also do an outline. You have to have an outline. I want it concise. It's for you, but I still want it done. And so what is it? Well, basically this. You want to get around 15 facts. What are they? People, events. Events are like laws, innovations, any event that might have happened. Organizations, concepts, events, could also be battles. I mean, any number of different things. I just put down a few examples, but also places. You'll get down information, just a list. You don't need to define them in a brainstorm list. You are not defining them. You're getting down information, hoping to trigger a memory. Heck, if you can't define it, don't put it in your essay. You will define it in your essay. And these are not everything you use in the essay. It's anything in that era. If I give you a question about what were the events that led to the Revolutionary War, you could talk about everything from the French and Indian War, mercantilism, Stamp Act, Tea Act, Proclamation of 1763, Pontiac's Rebellion, Continental Congress. Just get a bunch of stuff down, think about what you can use in your essay, and therefore make it harder to forget. And then there'll be things you can put in your outline. It helps immensely. It really does. Especially, let's say you get an essay on, let me throw one out, take the APUSH, and it could be on anything. Your essay could be anything. 1763 to 1980. So you get one, ooh, causes of the Civil War. You have to, okay, now think for a second. That's when you brainstorm. Bring it back. Bring back what you know. And hopefully one will trigger another memory, will trigger another memory, and try to connect it. It works. I'm not kidding. It works. So let me give you an example. Don't write this down. Just analyzing the compromise necessary to write the Constitution. If you're going to list 15 facts, let's think about it for a second. Just think about it for a second. You remember the Constitution. So what are the compromises? Or the events that happened with the Constitution? Let me ask you a quick question. What's the rebellion that led directly to the Constitution? Yeah, so there's one. Shays. You put down Shays, that's one. Got it. Who's the father of the Constitution? Remember him? Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Oops. Madison. John Madison. You might or might not use it in your essay, but that's a fact. You remember the big state or small state plans? What were they? Think. You know the big state plan? Where James Madison was from. Virginia plan. Small state? New Jersey. And then the Connecticut plan's also called, what's the compromise? Great compromise. What are the three branches of government? What's one? Executive and judicial. Got it? Remember that term for each group having a different enumerated checks and balances or separation of powers? There's two right there. What's the next compromise? What's compromise about population? 3/5. What's the how many years could they not touch slavery? And but government, 20 years, the government could regulate what? Yeah, commerce and trade. Very good. Those are the kind of things you write down. You might not use them all in your essay, but those are the things you write down. And you don't need to write down very much. If you write down 3/5, you know what you mean, right? You don't even need to write down talk about. You're just trying to get a list down as quick as possible to trigger a memory. You should be able to get about 15 things in about 2 minutes. Just takes a little practice to get your mind going. That's what we're doing now, practicing. So let me give you an example of what this looks like. Here's an essay. Oh, One more thing I forgot to say. Each body paragraph in your essay is essentially a short idea. So if you can come up with something to give you a couple short IDs, instead of one example, get two examples, boom, got that in there. Here is from a few years ago. We did an essay instead not on the Industrial Revolution, we did on the compromises. And there, the brainstormers. Look at stuff we just mentioned in class, right? Can everyone read that okay? You go to a wide off. That good? And thesis, we'll talk about thesis. Look out. They just jot down, all right, so you have to, short ID, you have to have an explanation. For the short IDs we do for a test, you need one example. For an essay, two examples. And then that last part of a short ID is you're trying to explain why it's important, what it led to, or what's important in a long essay. Relate it back to how you're answering the question. Relate it back to the question. Everyone hear what I said there? That's just an example. We'll talk about this more later. So what I want everyone to do right now is this. Review your notes on the Industrial Revolution. Go through it. I'll give you a second. Go through it really quick. Got a minute. Go. I'm filming this. This is going to be really exciting for the people at home. You can probably guess what's coming. Attention. All right, just do it in your notes. Try not to do this practice. Let's do a brainstorm list and try to get 10 to 15 things on. Are you ready for this question? By the way, questions this broad are both good and bad. Factors of the Industrial Revolution. 10 to 50 things. Go. Talk about it below. Where did they go from our meeting start? Answer the question. Where's everyone moving to? What's the first industry? I don't know what you're thinking. When you think of that list, you think you get 3 short IDs out of that? 2 short IDs? Go back, no, see if you can. Different information, 2 short IDs. Who was president during the War of 1812? Got that. All right, how are we out there? Who's got over 10? Anybody got 15? You with 15? All right, good. You can brainstorm 10 or 15 things you know. You know enough to write, you know. By the way, that's a good way to know if you don't know. You can't brainstorm 10 to 15 things. Better study that part. You know. All right, let's go talk about it. Let's go talk about it. There's lots of great ones we could have. So let's just go through. Raise your hand. We got one. We just start going. Yeah. Water park. Great. No.
Samuel Slater's machine tools.
Very good. Samuel Slater and machine. Those are 2 separate ones. Those are really.
They're related.
I know, but they actually, you can do it both for separate or the same. Very good. Yeah. Railroads. Great. Yeah. See, good.
Bridge blockade.
Blockade. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Say it again. Lowell. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, that would change for side. Yeah. Wealth of Nations. Good. Yeah. Eli Whitney. Yeah. Monopolies. Yeah. Horace Mann education. Great. Yeah. Say it again. Consumers. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Unions. Yeah. Wealth of Nations. Anybody have one we haven't mentioned? We have. These are great ones. Yeah. Yeah. Farms. Yeah. Good. Who? Say it again. Cotton gin, yeah. I faced it L and I couldn't get my head out of my head. Yeah. James Watt, yeah. Erie Canal, yeah. We have education seminars in that one too, but you got it good. Economies of scale. That one. Yeah, new transportation. Think about we could keep going, couldn't we? These are really good ones. If you get 10 or 15 of those things, you got separateness. You really are. And then if you don't really know it, you don't include it in your essay. Sound good? If you can get a couple, like a good topic out of this, good topic, that'll be what you're basically writing a short ID or a body paragraph. Get a couple examples for your brainstorm list, tie it back to your thesis. That's a paragraph. That's all it is. And think about it. You guys write. We've already written 4 and 3 short IDs. No sweat. That's the bulk of an essay right there. We could do it now. Here's a couple examples of students in the past. Can you read those? But looking back, we got almost all of these. You'll turn them in. I'm not going to go through with a fine-tooth comb. It's always going to have this down on this. I just want you to think about it. Just want you to think. Just a little bit of thinking makes it so much easier. Cotton gin. Frontier revivals. We'll get to that in a sec. Yeah. All right.
It's just actually a question.
Be something very close. Something very close. When you get a broad question like that, it's always a little bit scary because it's so broad. You think, oh, I can go in 1,000 different directions. But it's also a little bit easier because you can say, okay, factors in the Industrial Revolution. Well, I really know the transportation and I know capitalism. I'm just going to write about them. Just make sure I mention factors. So broad, you pick what you know and try not to get bogged down, because I would. Try not to get bogged down thinking how big it can be. All right, so let's get to the reactions to this new and changing world. Here is the drunkard's progress. So remember how they drank so much more? We're into cartoon now against it called temperance. And it's the drunkard's progress. And don't forget now, you need money to survive. And if you, especially when more and more men are going to become the sole breadwinner, if they drink it away, what's going to happen? So here, starting with a drink, having a little fun, a little bit of an argument, but then just, oh, having a great time. The drunkard's progress. And then it goes downhill. Drunken stupor, on the street, robbing people, and it's pretty graphic right here. What the ultimate cause of drunkenness is. And who suffers? The family doctor. And always like this, the problem with having this kind of drug, etc. But the issue is it's never been such a burden on the family if the sole breadwinner drinks it away. But also, if you're an employer, don't you want sober workers so you get higher productivity? Let's control their life. It's complex. So family life changed a lot. So families begin to move apart. It's so interesting to me because this is just so normal today, but it was pretty abnormal. So when the families did break up for whatever reason and move apart, that was really rare and unusual. You'd have 2 or 3 generations normally in a home. And it just seems so normal today, you know. I moved away from my parents. And railroads dramatically changed people. They connected. We already I jokingly talked about opening up more prospects for marriage, but it's really true. Meeting new people, etc. Also, people got married younger. Before the Industrial Revolution, you really couldn't get married if you were an established craftsman, had your own farm, which was difficult in the family farm situation. But as wage work started to replace the old system, it's amazing how much younger they got married. It was pretty normal, early 30s to be married before the Industrial Revolution, and then it dropped to the early 20s. Now, bad economic times, the marriage age would go up a little bit. When there's a scene that's a lot of hope for the future and prosperity, marriage age got really younger. The youngest time in U.S. history about getting married was the 1950s, 1960s. Similar kind of dynamic, confident towards the future. 18, 19-year-old was very common, sometimes younger, to get married. And it's very weird to think about in high school today. That never happens. But back then, it was really common to have people in high school be married. Got married like right at the end. I don't know how long it lasted, but that's another story. Also, after you get done working, the concept of retirement did not exist. Now, I'm using the term retirement in a nice way. For most people, if they can no longer get a job and earn wage work, what's going to happen to them? Yeah, starvation was everybody was terrified when they couldn't work anymore. I mean, the really only way was to move back in with their kids who already are suffering because they too are relying upon a wage. Or they started setting up these old folks' homes where literally there were these horrific dorm-like areas where old people were sent to die. And they were worse than you can imagine. Just beyond comprehension. But that's all brand new. Also, free time was different. You know, your life, your job, it's all kind of tied together with family. Now it's totally different. The few hours you might have off from work, it was just a total change. That's one of the reasons why the way people drank, that's why temperance was such a big deal, changed. Before, it was just kind of like you just drank during the day. It was just the way culture was. After the Industrial Revolution, more and more people would work all day, and then to whatever, to blow off steam or try to get off top of their life is with this job, they would binge drink. And that was well, I think we all know the problem with that. And more urban. But like this house right there, that's a balloon frame house. Before, they would literally kind of stack the boards up and make the house here. To make houses quicker, they developed a system where you build a frame and then add the siding and roof to the frame, which is how they build houses today. You build it faster and it's trying to be stronger. But they need it by necessity because so many people were moving into cities, you needed houses quick. And once again, consumers. So once you consumers, what you eat, because you're buying it, changes. What you eat. And more variety or less variety, depending on your wealth. Clothing went from being very unique and it was built custom made for you. But you're not going to have a lot of it because custom made takes a lot more time to sizes mass produce. Maybe not fit quite as well, but you might have more of it. Furniture could be mass produced. You see a big change in the way people's households work. And also a big matter of if you made it, you got nicer furniture. You have a sign to show you made it. And this concept of middle class can afford to have this. But nothing changed more in family life than what happened to women. The role of women, and I've already hinted at this a few times, would change so dramatically that, and we're still living in the vestiges of that change, where it was such a big change, it's so traumatic that people just almost just thought it was always this way because it couldn't have been any different because it was such a big change. So what happened? Women lost economic value. Women lost economic value. Remember before, that's why I put the arrow. I don't know what I was thinking when I put an arrow, but remember I showed you that picture of them all working, that putting out system? Everybody's important. No longer. Even though a significant number of women still worked in factory positions. Remember when I mentioned the Lowell girls when they got married, they were fired? If you're relying upon a wage, who earns the wage becomes the most important. And for most families, it was the man. And so women lost economic value, which was really hard. They knew it. Even if it wasn't like they could put it into terms, like this huge shift about importance and value would happen, but it would be it's just kind of like gradually one day we're not as important. And women did struggle against this. Also, they became more dependent upon men. They need men. Now, of course, especially legally, culturally, socially, women were second-class citizens. And yes, they were dependent on men a lot. Not like it's going to be in the Industrial Revolution. Not like it's going to be. And you could start seeing it in the 1810s, 20s, but by the 1840s, women lost almost all of their legal and political rights. Remember I told you some women could vote. That's going to be gone. By the way, you like the picture? I mean, you can tell who's the most important, can't you? Who stands? Okay, 9-question quiz tomorrow. It'll be easy. I'll give you a thing on essays tomorrow then. Running William discuss about. Oh, I wasn't able to type in grades. My computer's all messed up. Hopefully tomorrow.